the panel discussion will be consisted of first Nordic metal, and that's Russell Bradford. So please enter the stage, and you can have you can choose seat. And then we have Arctic Minerals, Peter George. So just pop up here, and Valkea Resources, Chris Donaldson. We have Noora, Ahola, Mawson, so you're familiar with the stage now. And then last but not least, Ivar Fossum, Nordic Mining Advisor, I should say. So please have a seat. And the topic today is the Nordic Mining Region. And I will kick off with some questions, and then we will look out here, and you will get the mic. So thank you for joining us here. Now I'm going to first I'll make a short reflection. We have no Swedish managers here. We have one Scandinavian, Norway, and we have one from Finland, but no one in Sweden. That's disappointing, I think. But it's not your fault, it's our fault. And we will come to that, of course. Why don't we understand this sector when we do have the LKAB, the Sandvik, and the Atlas of the world? Well, but first, I'd like to ask each and every one of you one thing, because we have seen the macro environment, and we also see that the EU is coming out with one manifesto after the other, critical minerals, and we need to be self-sufficient and so on. But in practice, does it really matter? If we start with you.
Does it really matter?
Yeah, does it really matter? Can you practically say, yes, we benefit from the EU, or is it more local support that you need?
Well, I tap into my experience, and some of you heard my talk before. I've worked in some pretty remote areas around the world, and I look at Europe, I look at Sweden and Finland, and I think what's important for any developer is the rules of engagement, and they have to be understood, and they are the rules, so that's how you got to play. So I've worked in some parts of the world where those rules change during development, or depending on lots of things, right? And it makes it difficult for capital deployment, makes it difficult for shareholders, it makes it difficult for management and the board. What I feel about Sweden, and I just talk about Sweden and Finland, that's where our projects are. I'm very impressed with the infrastructure. I'm very impressed with the understanding of mining in these countries. And we all know that Sweden and Finland, in terms of their risk profile, is very seen in a very positive light. So there's always a cost to do business. It's as simple as that. There's no free lunches anymore, right? But as a developer, I think it's important that our governance is correct. I think it's important that our environmental compliance, our social approach to building these mines. I said earlier, the easy bit's building the mine. We've got to build a mine anywhere, right? That's what engineers do. But it's incorporating that understanding with the backyard that you're in. So I feel very comfortable coming to Sweden and Finland and to understand and see how these countries operate. I'm very comfortable with it, so I don't have a problem with it at all.
And Peter, you're as comfortable?
Yeah, I'm very comfortable. Look, I've been operating in and out of Sweden for 30 years. So I started my time in Boliden as a junior engineer going back into the 90s, and come through a period where we've got the left and the right side of politics couldn't agree on anything. Whereas I think 2-3 years ago, both the left and the right both acknowledged that they love mines, which was a bit of a watershed moment, I think, especially for Sweden. And so I think if you look at the European Union and the Critical Metals Act, I think we're actually ahead of that. You know, we're actually trying to lead the way as far as Europe is concerned.
Yeah, exactly. And when you say we, you refer to the Nordics.
Yes.
Yeah. And Chris, obviously you would agree because you're here, but the finer point here is really the Scandinavians are ahead of EU, so whatever EU will say, we've already done, if I rephrase the question. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of a newcomer to Finland and northern Finland, and you know what attracted us to the area was, you know, we're right next to the Kittilä mine, which is the largest gold producer in Europe. So there's a pathway to develop mines. To me, it's what's happening locally that is most important, and then it goes out from there. In terms of the timelines of permitting and the ability to move a project forward, you know, it's okay to have a little bit longer timelines. And you know, in Finland, they have some set guidelines, but at least they're set. And in other parts of the world, you know, sometimes, you know, they may have 2-year timelines, but then you have an extra duty to consult, and you don't want to be confrontational with the locals. So that can get extended out many years, and that has real effect on, you know, obviously your timelines, but also the lack of certainty scares away capital, and you know, that's been very challenging up to date.
And Noora, of course, you're partial here, but if we look, I think you mentioned that you lived in Rovaniemi?
Yes.
Yes, and that is the main hub for the Finnish Lapland. But how do you see that the Finnish Lapland is, well, the municipal, as it were? How do you feel that they support your projects?
Well, of course, we have been working there in Rovaniemi area 15 years now, and the whole team is part of the community, so they know us. We live there every day. It's our neighbors who we talk with, so it's easy. All the decision makers there, they know the project very well. They know the team, which is important. But it's also important to have the government relations, EU connections, because it's always the EU legislation which applies in every EU country, no matter if it's Finland or Sweden. So there are little differences in the national legislations and like the permitting processes. But yeah, I think it's easy when you live there, and you need to show your face every day. So of course you are very transparent on everything you do.
And Ivar, as an advisor, so how much are you advising in the, let's say, approach to the EU?
Well, I'm doing my best as a part of also the Norwegian Quarrying and Mining Association, and now I've been heading Nordics for 19 years now, so just being advisor. I think the push from EU is really important, at least for Norway, but also I think for the Nordics. And I think there's a lot to harvest from the synergies across the three nations. And there has been for many years, there are some value chains with transportation of iron ore, smelting. Boliden is a good example. And I think, at least for Norway, the push is really necessary to get perspective. And EU, I think, if you look at the Nordics in terms of international area, it's a fairly small area. So we should have a common view about it. It should be a harmonizing of the laws, and the picture is just not great. I mean, there is still more and more appeals. It still takes time, and even though the constitutional risk is very low, I mean, you have your rights, they stick. But there's still a lot of political risk in our countries, and we see that the NGOs are extremely clever in nurturing the narrative that mining is bad and we don't need it, and they mix in the climate effects and many different things. So I think the EU push is important.
And I think that's a good segue to my next question. It's like we rehearsed. But coming back to your presentation here, Peter, where you touched upon this. So how well do you think that the public understands the mining industry? Because you're actually there with mud on your shoes and trying to persuade the local authorities. Obviously, if you have the support of the government, but then you need to persuade the local authorities and perhaps the local inhabitants. How well do you think we understand this industry?
I mean, I don't think we understand it well as an industry, but you know, each project is different in some respects and depends on where you are. I mean, we're operating down there in Donaldson, for example, and they haven't had any mining for 150 years. So the old guys are long gone. But I mean, Sweden especially, you know, it's a, no matter which way you look at it, we're a socialistic bunch. You know, we have our rules and our processes that we follow, and you know, everybody is allowed to have their say. So you know, you have to keep that in mind as a mining company or an explorer when you come in, and you have to listen. You know, you can't just go over the top of the people here. You have to take into account what they have to say. You have to do your homework with regards to what the flora and fauna looks like, what the culture looks like, and as I said, it's different in every place. But you then have to, as part of the process that we go through, understand how we could potentially impact on all of those things, and then explain what it is we're going to do about it as we move forward.
And then coming back then to what Ivar said, then obviously you're up against some big boys then. But Russell, you just had a presentation about the merger here. So how well do you think that the Swedish investment community understands mining? Because it's quite interesting to see. Let's say, if I express myself a little bluntly here, foreigners taking over Swedish assets and merging with a non-Swedish company. It makes perfect sense, but why haven't we done that? So how well do you think that the investment capital in Sweden understand this? And beware, you have them here.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Look, I mean, there's an opportunity here. Look, what I've seen of the Nordics, and again, getting back to my experience where I've worked and operated, there's a time and place to bring skills into a country. But I think the Nordics, Sweden and Finland, you guys get mining, right? You've cracked the egg, you know how big a mine is and you know what it has to be done and the investment, the capital, the skill requirements. I mean, Noora's a big part of what we need to do in this part of the world, to be quite frank with you, because, you know, my skill set, I've got to learn how to operate here. I haven't done anything here before, but luckily we've got Noora on board. So we have to take that all on board, and I think what we have to do as foreigners is demonstrate that we're good corporate citizens. As we do in other countries. You'll never build a mine if you don't get that right. I know that. You know, one thing I've learned is just respect where you're working. And we have to spend a lot of time understanding that, because the mine will come. And if it takes a little longer, that's so be it. But we have to integrate with all of our stakeholders, because if one is not happy, it's not happening. It won't happen.
And integrating with all the stakeholders, and I'll turn to you then, Chris. Is it easy to integrate with the stakeholders, the institutional capital? I have a feeling that it's difficult to get the big funds on board. It's not only a question of market cap, because they're happy to blow the money on any IT startup here. And I can say that because I'm Swedish, but...
So is the question, is it hard to get...
institutional capital.
Institutional capital from the Nordics?
When you knock on the door, do they open and say, yes, we're very interested?
It's getting better. You know, certainly the last 8-10 years have been very, very difficult, especially for smaller companies. This last year is dramatically different from it was a year ago. And the example, I was at a conference in Denver that many of us go to last year, and I was hat in hand, begging, hustling, trying to get some money. And then this year, I had every banker there saying, "Oh, how much money do you want? You got to raise it now. It's out there." So the funds have done well. We saw with the last presentation, they've had some tremendous success. And those who predominantly invest in producers, when they're overweighted in producers, then they'll start trimming that, and it comes down to the developers and juniors, and that's happening. And I think we've had a few blips along the last decade, but I think it looks like this is going to be a sustained run here, driven by fundamentals that haven't been there in a long time.
Mm. And if I turn to you then, Noora, and coming back to Finland, as you have in your back pocket there, do you find it easy to attract investments, retail or financials into Mawson and the newco?
Well, yes. I would say we have been very lucky with our shareholders. We know them all very well. They are long-term shareholders, very steady. Most of our money comes from Europe, actually. So I think when you know your investors and you have good shareholder base, it's also easier to attract more and more also Nordic investors, because they follow you, they see what's happening, how you're doing. So I'm very happy when we did the IPO with the Mawson Finland. It was few days time and we were able to get investments from almost 100 different Finnish investors.
Okay.
So it's not bad. But you need to be able to present what you have there in the background and who are your supporters.
If I could just add to that, there was a study this year put out by the Fraser Institute that ranked Finland as the #1 mining jurisdiction in the world. And some people poke holes in that study, but it got a lot of attention to Finland. Jurisdiction matters, and when you get that kind of endorsement, it allows people to be more comfortable to invest in the region. And Finland is getting a lot of attention now because of that.
Mm-hmm. And if we move westwards to Norway, then Norway is full of capital or risk capital, I would say. But in my humble opinion, that would be more focused on the oil industry and the shipping industry. So as an expert in the sector and in your country, where do you, is it risk capital or is it long-term investments that will flow into the mining?
No, you're right. There's not a lack of capital at all. There's almost too much capital because you don't have the commercial drivers to actually establish new mines in Norway. And the investment sector is really small. The knowledge of the mining sector between the investors is really low. So they have to be educated much more. So there is a lot of potential there to grow, I think. And also when you look to Sweden and Finland, there is still a lot of juniors that are struggling to get risk capital too. They are down there, they had to stop exploration. So we had to face that there is a lot of potential if there are more educated investors that see the potential also in the small juniors, I think, coming across. And coming back to Russell's point about the local communities, I think we have to realize that we are doing social development along with building a mine. So we have to have that empathy with the local community, and in our societies, a lot of the authority is actually pushed down to fairly small municipalities in terms of zoning plans and so forth. And if they are not your partner, you're dead.
Yeah, and that comes back to one of the reflections that we had a previous speaker here saying that also a non-Sweden working in Canada, where they would say that one of our problems would be that if we are in Canada or somewhere else, you can go to the local community and say, okay, well, we can build the road for you, we can build the kindergarten or what have you, but that isn't really doable in Sweden. Am I correct there? You're nodding, Peter. You agree with me?
He has to answer. Look, I think that's fair. I mean, we've studied this a lot with regards to our projects as well. I mean, you have to be extremely careful. I mean, you can go in there with the attitude of, look, let's sponsor the football team or let's buy this road or this thing, but it's to a large extent that's also can be considered as bribery in some aspects in our society here. So you just have to be extremely careful with the way that you approach those sorts of things. And there are ways to ensure that, you know, as a company that we want to invest in the communes that we work in, you know, but you have to ensure that the money that goes into there is shared on a viable way that doesn't necessarily benefit one or two individuals more than anybody else. So it's just a trap for foreign players, I guess, to ensure that you just do things in a socially acceptable way.
So you're trapped a little bit as any politician that likes to invest in the infrastructure or a hospital. You don't win an election on that, one could argue. But so what can you do as an industry to improve, let's say, the attitude in civil society here? Because obviously we have the legislation, which you all are very much in favor of, the infrastructure and the knowledge, and you have the equipment and energy and so on. So it must come down to, let's say, the public opinion and the investors' opinion. So let's go for the public opinion and then perhaps the investors. So Russell, I come to you again with the tricky one.
Well, look, you know, there's nothing better than demonstrating, right? It's one thing saying we're going to do X, Y, Z, but you've got to demonstrate your action to your communities. You know, I remember the one project we did. We had to bring this equipment in. We were building that, and we had to bring this equipment in, and the truck came over the bridge, and the bridge collapsed, and it was just a mess. And anyway, and of course the community, like, well, what have you done now? That's cut off the light. We can't get to this. We can't get to the market, and all this kind of stuff. So I say, well, we have to not only communicate the plan. It's important. A stakeholder engagement map is so important. There's different messages. There's different frequencies of that message. There's different kind of underlying message in there, right? So there's a time and place to talk about certain things, and a big part of how we put projects together is with a stakeholder engagement map. You know, the Prime Minister wants to hear one thing, and the mayor of that town wants to hear something very different, right? So we have to, it's fine to say that we've done a route map and we're not going to drive over that bridge. Well, don't drive over the bridge, because if you do and it collapses, the community is going to say, you guys are jokers. You're not doing what you told us at the town hall meeting. So we have to, our actions have to be followed through. So there's a lot of planning, there's a lot of understanding, engagement, and then execution. If you've only got one chance at this, so just get it right. So, you know, you learn these things, right? And the one thing you learn is before you execute, do reconnaissance, because it's 90% reconnaissance, 10% execution. That's my view anyway. So get that right. And if you get that right with your local communities and your stakeholders, everything will be fine. But get it wrong once, well, you got to backpedal, and then that's time, that's money, that's reputation, and then that's the thin end with the wedge. You don't want to go there, so it's important, right? Just get your vision and your planning correct, and then everyone will be on side.
And if I turn to you then, Ivar, as an advisor, if we can get an advice for free here, when it comes to the public approach, what do you think can be done? And also, may I ask, do you think we need a different approach for the different countries? Although an outsider may see the Nordic as Nordics, whereas I'm as a Swede would see the difference between Finland and Norway and Sweden.
Well, first a general comment. I certainly consent to what Russell says, and in general, I think we have conveyed the message to the community and also public, the little bit the evolution of building a mine. In terms of there is so much need for capital, and you can easily get a stamp because you're running around and you're trying to finance things, and the perception of you can be different. So I think people need to understand the evolution, how to build a mine. And the other thing, and an example from Norway, specifically regarding legislation, a small municipality doesn't really know what's the outcome will be in the future if they're hosting a new mine. Because most of the income tax goes straight to the treasury,
Yes.
and they get something back. So my proposal would be that some of the income tax should go directly to the municipality. So they have a predictable regime. They know what happens if they build a mine within their boundaries. Today, it's a little bit kind of a game for them. So that would be my very, very specific proposal for Norway. I don't know exactly how it works in the other countries.
What would you say, Noora?
Well, yes, I think when everything is predictable, it's much better for everyone. But I see when it comes to exploration and mining, I remember when I started with the project over 10 years ago, everybody was already expecting the mine to be there in a year or two. So it's kind of, you need to educate the local people, decision makers, everybody on their own level. What is exploration, what is mining, where we are heading, and how certain we are that certain things will happen or not. And if I think about like the communities, the municipal level, people change there. There are elections every 4th year, so you need to start all over again. And it's kind of constant work, keeping everybody updated where we are at and where we are heading to. And but yeah, I think the more predictable it's for everyone, it's more easier.
And that's interesting because it's in your own backyard, so to speak. But Chris, you're not that Finnish, are you?
No, I'm a third Norwegian, though.
Oh yeah, okay. But so what do you experience as let's say the most difficult when obviously you tend to agree here, but in your communication?
Yeah, a couple things. So I'm based in Vancouver and recognize that we don't have somebody on the ground. We employ Geopool, who does a lot of this for us, but we've just hired a country manager who's, as Noora said, they see every day, and which is important. But I agree with what everybody said here. The only thing I would add is, the industry has gotten a lot better than it has, over the last 20 years. If you had this conference 20 years ago, we wouldn't have this panel. And I think, I'd like to think we're modern miners. Our history, I ran community relations for a big project up in the Yukon. It's the first thing you do is consult with the local peoples and understand, what might benefit them and what their concerns are, and you lead with that. And you try to get ahead of any potential issues before it happens. In Canada, in fact, it's mandated that you have a duty to consult. And I think most people, even in northern Finland, where you don't necessarily have that duty to consult with the Sami there, we do it anyways to get ahead of it, because it's probably the main thing that could stop a project. And so I think we're improving, but at the end of the day, what Russell said, we've got to demonstrate it now as we're having kind of a new wave of projects moving forward.
So you are a pleasant surprise to the Finnish Lapland inhabitants there when you knock on the door. Peter, I know for a fact that you've been very busy with the local municipal at Hennesberg or Henneviken there. Do you think that you get good mileage for the effort, so you get the support? And would it be more of the same going forward, or will it be? Are you so to speak done with the communication?
No, I don't think it ever ends, as long as we're there. And we're potentially talking about a multi-decade project there, so that's most important to get the groundwork done right from day one. And we've spent a lot of time talking to both the federal politicians and the local mayors. It's most important that we. And I think I've had in the last year probably 3 or 4 catch-ups with them, and I think I even have another one tomorrow with one of the mayors, just updating them on what we're doing. We're hopefully So we've just finished a geophysics campaign over there. We had an MMT survey with a helicopter flying over the top with, you know, a probe hanging 50 metres below it, which, you know, for most people that have never seen anything like that in the mining industry, it looks a little bit like an atom bomb, I have to admit, and it can be a bit scary for some people. So we did a big campaign and made sure that we had a big meeting with all 4 mayors, and, you know, we sit over the top of 4 communes, which makes it quite complicated. But we also went out with a big information campaign to the local people, and even went so far as to contact the landowners with horses, just to make sure that they weren't scared by the helicopters coming over the top. So, I think that went down really well. So, you know, and hopefully that will set us in good stead for when we start our next drilling campaign in a few months.
So even the small things matter. And I'll turn to the audience here. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand and we'll deal with those. Feel free to open. And while you consider your questions, I'll just ask the panel here. I mean, it's interesting to see First Nordic and Mawson. We have a merger and consolidation here. This is the start of something. You can get the feeling of that. Obviously, Russell, you're part of the part in that discussion. So obviously for you, it's pretty natural that there will be a consolidation going forward. But Ivar, as a Nordic mining advisor with many years in the industry, would this be the golden age for consolidation among the miners? Are we entering that now?
Well, I'm not so sure, but there is certain. We're moving in the right direction, and I think conferences like this is really a good contribution to have the perspective and to have people to meet. And at least speaking for Norway, we should be very humble. We have a lot to learn in this business. Okay. I mean, it's a reawakening. The sector has been almost virtually nothing, very, very few mines. And different in Sweden and Finland, you have big technologically companies, institutions, you have bigger mines. So it's a different aspect. So I think we have a big upside in Norway.
And Peter, you mentioned, because you were asked the question, what's your end game? And obviously you said that, well, it takes a while to go from a developer to a producer. Do you think that there will be consolidation among the miners, as it were, or will the big boys knock on the door?
Oh, look, it's a very small market here. There's not many players. And we've had 50 years of underinvestment in exploration in this part of the world, which is disgusting in my opinion. But that's what's happened, and consequently, there are very few new projects coming along. So, you know, in one respect, that gives me as the executive director of one of these companies gives me a massive advantage, because I have things that I know that bigger boys want. So, you know, fantastic from my point of view if they come along and would like to take a part of what we have, but we're in no particular hurry either. You know, we think we have a 5-year window where we can add a huge amount of value to the company, take us all the way through to construction ready, and we also know that in 5 years' time there's going to be 10 companies lining up knocking on our door. So.
And if you look at the recent merger that we heard of today, so Russell and Noora, what kind of timeline do you think that we should look at as investors here? We're talking about 5 or 6 years, or to the next step, or are you preparing, or do you think that the industry is preparing for something to happen more rapidly? I just get the feeling that we're on a tipping point here.
Well, look, we can all get excited about the gold price, right? And whatever, right? I mean, and is that in my control? No, it's not. So I've got to focus what's in my control. And if we've got $10,000 an ounce gold, is that going to make my timeline any different? It's not. No. I've got to do the work. And, you know, you've got no choice. You have to do the environmental monitoring. You have to do the seasonal monitoring. You have to do the stakeholder engagement. And then all of the engineering work. And by the way, you've got all the drilling and the compliance to pull out a feasibility. Can you fast track that? I've been doing this for 30 odd years. Probably not, because some clever guy's going to come knock on your door from the banks one day and say, where is that study? Well, we're clever and we didn't do it. And they say, well, that's why you're not getting that 300 million to build your bank, because you haven't done that correctly. So you've got to tick the boxes, right? And we know the script. So I think you've got to be careful you don't get ahead of yourself, right? It's all great, and I've been in the nickel game. Well, we all know what happened in 2008, right? I've been in the uranium game. Well, we all know what happened in 2012. So now we're in the gold game. So I look at these things it's great. I mean, it's lovely. All this money's coming back into mine. I was in Canada 2 weeks ago. What a difference. There is money everywhere. I mean, last year it was tumbleweed. It's changed. It is so changed. And, we've all seen it before, and our company's no different. We've got 80 million raised in a week like this. You've got to be careful now. Your discipline on capital management is more and more now important than ever. You've got to demonstrate to investor and stakeholder community you are a responsible company deploying capital for the right things. You will not, regardless of any commodity price, change your runway to get into development. So, I mean, someone said to me in Canada, so, with this gold price, 2028, 29, going to be production. It's like, no, we can't. It's going to take 2 years to build the mine anyway, so we can't do it.
That's true.
So, yeah, let's not get ahead of ourselves with these commodity prices. Great time to be mining, but hey, we've got our work to do, so I don't know what the rest of the panel think, but that's my view on life.
Anyone disagrees? But you touch upon one thing that I thought was interesting. You referred to in Canada, and there's a lot of money floating around here, and also the banks would like to have something. But do you finance yourself with the local banks here? You're not Swedish, and some of you are Finnish, of course, but you are operating here in Scandinavia. But are you financing, if you go to the bank, would it be a Scandinavian bank, or will it be a Canadian bank, or Australian bank where you have your connections? So we start with Chris here.
To date, I haven't. We've raised our money locally through our connections in Canada and a little bit in Europe. But I'm hoping to change that. I mean, this conference is a good example. I mean, last year it was about maybe half the size, half the investors here. This year, it's a tremendous response. It's been a fantastic conference. The best sign for me is I'm seeing funds that were in other sectors that are now coming in. Generalists are coming in, they're branching out. It's also, expensive to travel back and forth. But as we move forward, certainly, our project resonates with Europeans, and I'd love to have a balanced shareholder registry.
Yeah, and one of the best things to do that is to be listed in the Swedish market, as you are. Peter, any comments or thoughts on knocking on the Swedish banks?
Yeah, well, look, we're a Stockholm-listed company. We are a Swedish company, so it's. Our investors have changed as we've moved through the different milestones over the last 12 months. I mean, we've raised about 40 million. I mean, when we started over a year ago, it was a lot of Australian money, and that's morphed into a significant percentage of Swedish money and European money. But we're also moving now into probably a bit of a larger investor type as well, getting more and talking to the banks. I guess one negative aspect of that is that I don't think the Swedish banks really understand the junior mining sector. If that's the answer you're looking for, that's an education process that we have to go through to educate our investment community, but as well as the banks. The Swedish banks have had a good run on the tech sector for the last 10, 15 years, and some of them are still stuck in it, if you ask me. But I think that will change.
So I think the key point here is that you still have a lot of education to do on let's say the local ground and on the institutional side and also on the banks, and it's just started. So this should be very interesting to see. Well. We're out of time, so I thank you so much. I think we give them a round of applause.